This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of having a new friend of mine, Jim Crowell, coming in from Arizona. He is an expert in running health clubs, running studios, giving people some wisdom, and has now become our COVID-proofing authority on the industry going forward. So, Jim, welcome to Halo Talks.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. This will be fun.
Awesome. So, before you talk about, your consulting and, some of the investing you've done and making sure that people succeed, why don't you, give us a little background? You were like me, a finance guy and doing some energy trading. And I'm assuming that was probably financially rewarding and socially meaningless, or, maybe not helping the world. So I'm in the same boat. I feel like I'm, even, when you put points up on the board, it's like, all these thousands of people working out because of something that you help somebody tweak. So take us back from the start.
Yeah, I actually always kind of start with, I was kind of an athlete and a coach when I was really young. So back when I was 14, I was playing sports, I was coaching kids already, and I was also learning about the stock market, and I was fascinated by, typical story. Fast forward a little bit, I went to school at Penn State, played tennis for Penn State, and double majored in finance and economics, and never for 1 second thought that I wouldn't end up, in investment banking or trading or something like that. And I certainly think back then was probably, a large percentage about just the prestige of the industry. But, now at 37, which I am now, I'm fascinated by the ideas. But so I get out of Penn State, I go work for a hedge fund for 5 years, and eye-opening, just absolutely eye-opening into how money actually moves, how deals are actually done, how analysis actually takes place. And I really loved being in that world, but I really felt pulled back into the athletic fitness, related arena for sort of the reasons that you said. I wanted to have maybe more one-to-one impact with people. I thought that I could be successful doing anything, that's maybe overly cocky, but whatever. And so I ended up quitting in 2010 and moving back. I was in Austin at that point. I moved up to Pittsburgh and opened I ultimately had 2 gyms, built those up and really understood what it takes to succeed in that arena. And we had a bunch of clients in the Pittsburgh area, got really well known, and then ended up selling those in 2014 and came down to Arizona with the company that I actually just resigned from. And for OPEX, what I was really doing was building out the structure of the company. I built out a bunch of the business education for health and wellness. We had a one-to-one remote coaching company. So I really understand what it takes to work with people online, which now in this world is premium, and just really enjoyed that. Built up anywhere from 50 to 75 gym affiliation program for OPEX as well. And we're very well known in the individual design realm of coaching clients. So at this point, what I'm kind of doing now is I'm actually debating about what the next big step for me is, but I'm doing advising work right now. And I love working with companies and understanding health, wellness, fitness. And, so when it was kind of time to talk to you guys, I thought it would be really interesting to sort of just hit on maybe some of those learnings that I've picked up sort of at the operator level as well as the investor advisor level, because the industry really isn't that big, even though the market size of it's growing very fast. So I always kind of keep meeting or re-meeting the same types of people, right? You see similar things done over and over and over and over again in this industry. But I do think, particularly with COVID, a lot of deeply entrenched thoughts are going to shift pretty quickly in this industry. And I think that, people are going to have to be ready for it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the perspectives we had when the shutdown happened in, I kind of say, not even jokingly, we kind of became entrepreneurial therapists over the last, 162 days. But it basically forced a lot of these operators to say, hey, look, I got this bricks and mortar business. And in the last several years, most operators have been doing relatively well just based on, the economic condition and, influx of more people, trying to live a healthier lifestyle. But they kind of left some of the, digital and kind of thinking about like, what's the next phase of this kind of, like a, Gretzky as an example said, I always skate to where the puck's going. I don't kind of wait for the puck to come to me. So I feel like, this pause in the business environments actually allow people to say, hey, look, that Peloton, market, like it's actually, I own the member. I've actually got a relationship with them. Like I don't have to cede that to them because I actually can't do that. So, maybe you want to start off kind of just talking about like COVID proofing, clubs and, some of your takeaways from what people are doing right, what people are doing wrong, a little snapshot and of how you think the new normal is going to be. And I think some of this actually, like contactless check-in, it should have happened like 5 years ago anyway. So some of these things might be like important that it have happened. Unfortunately, the reason why it happened is, not a good one, but, we're innovating a little.
Yeah, I think if we go back, let's just go back to 2010 and the massive emergence of boutique, particularly small group training that came out of it, mixed with, call it lifestyle, big box, lifetime type gyms. That model was done all the way across the board. Some people did it very operationally efficiently. Other people did it very inefficiently. But there was almost nobody that had a relationship with their client outside of the four walls of their facility. Mm-hmm. And what we have seen is that if you didn't have a relationship with your client outside of your facility, it was very difficult to create it when COVID hit. And so what we're going to see is, I don't think that the brick and mortar gym business goes away, but I do think that the connection to the client is going to be much deeper outside of the gym, whether that's a basic CRM system that helps with consistent accountability for small things like sleep and eating and drinking water and walking, et cetera, getting in the sun. I think if you have a gym, you need to be having that simple discussion with your clients, but you also need to bake into your model how you can have individual conversations with them. Like if you look at the group training facilities that were out there that were the quote unquote darlings, they were the most operationally efficient, meaning you got one coach for numerous people. You can't possibly speak to those folks one-to-one. I think that probably what we'll see is, maybe this is the wrong word, but a slightly more unequal scenario emerge where prices might actually rise for people who can afford them, but the service level is going to be a lot more deep. And so if you can have a deeper service level, you can now work with people online, offline, and build a brick and mortar and still touch them when they're not there.
Yeah, one of the things that always kind of pissed me off, to not, mince words, was, you had a studio operator, had 300 or 400 members. And, they'd call up and they'd say like, here's what the data says. And, I'm like, what do the people say? Like, you only got 300 or 400 people to talk to, and they're in and out. And one of the things Dave Gannon and I talk about a lot is, people define their workouts and, what they do probably is like probably the top 5 things that they say about themselves, so like the importance of it. And then you look at the price that they pay, to be in that top 5, we agree that, prices should increase and results should increase, in parallel with what people do, because it's part of their goals, their daily routine. So kind of, how do you see, the connectivity, not just, somebody saying, oh yeah, Jim, I got a CRM. Like, I send out emails once a month and, oh yeah. If somebody, doesn't show up for 90 days, it sends them out like an automatic drip campaign. Like, what's your response to those types of comments?
I still believe that the fitness business, if you're going to say that you're not a large box Globo Gym style chain, it's still down to a relationship. And if you think that that's not the case, I would argue pretty hard on that, because people need to make a decision every day to show up. And if you can't overcome I'm interested in going to hang out with friends or colleagues in this facility, they're not going to show up. I mean, I think the data would probably support that. So you have to build, certain gym chains call it communities, right? But you have to build connection with people at a deeper level than you might know their first name. And so an interesting thing is that in the model that we built for OPEX, we worked one-to-one with those clients, and we had a monthly consultation individually with each of the clients that was in the gym. Mm-hmm. Our gyms globally only lost 7% of their clients when COVID hit. And that was months after COVID had hit. So there was enough time to really get strong data on that. And many of the gyms now have more clients because they're able to say, we can onboard you digitally, or we can onboard you from anywhere. And then when we're able to reopen, you'll come into the gym and we can work that relationship. I think that gyms need to actually build a relationship. And to your point, Pete, if you don't speak to somebody, if you there's only 300 or 400 people, you can know those folks, and ultimately your coaches should be assigned to know those folks. You have to build an honest relationship with them because you can understand when the issues are going to arise. So I'm all for the drip campaigns, but I much prefer if you have a strategic and consistent way of speaking to them, whether it's in a consultation form or you do, you reassess them, but sit down with them. And obviously I think you should get paid for it, but sure, you need to sit down with them to nurture that relationship so that you get ahead of the problems that would arise.
Yeah. Like, before COVID, I was a pretty adamant Soul Cycle, enthusiast and rider. And, at age 48, it probably makes up like 70% of my apparel at this point, from like my socks to my flip-flops to, my shirt that I'm wearing right now. But, the thing that drove me crazy is I'm spending, I don't know, probably $900 a month, right? Doing, between my fiance and I, like 30 classes a month. And like, I walked in there 20 times a month, 15, 20 times a month. And no one ever asked me like, hey man, what are you looking to achieve? Like, that's like the most simplistic question that I have no idea why that doesn't happen. Like every time you check in.
And that's
so
where
like, I feel like we got so far to like, yeah, I got a CRM. It's like, you have a relationship, like use the opportunity.
Yeah. And I think we're going to change what a really cool brand means coming out of COVID.
That's interesting.
I think SoulCycle built a beautiful brand, but they didn't build a connective at the individual level. They built the community connective, right? So it's like you connected with SoulCycle, beautiful thing. But when something goes wrong, members leave. And,
right,
how are they going to get them back? There's no way of doing it. However, it didn't matter because they were the darling, and so when that momentum's running, run it hot. But now the model won't work at all because you don't have the operational economics to get enough people into the room for it to work. Now, clearly you'll try to go online, but when they had those margins, I would argue that they could have put some better systems in place to get better retention at the unique client level, which would have then created, and this is all looking backwards, right? And which would have created better retention if something were to have gone wrong. I mean, I'm a big competitive advantage guy, and their brand was important. But think about how many other spin studios built cool brands, or think about Barry's, or think about even Orange Theory. They're all cool brands. But what is the competitive advantage that keeps people there? That was the harder part, and so I think that this is what people are scrambling, trying to figure out is how do we keep people engaged if they can come in or they have to be at home? And that's a much harder question. But I do think that it comes down to, Scott Galloway, I'm a fan of him, from NYU. It's like, it's the brain, the heart, and the genitals, right? Like you got to figure out where you connect the best to, and you better just put everything behind creating a brand that does that, which to SoulCycle's credit, they did, but they just didn't necessarily support the individual, which didn't matter until, well, I think that there were some challenges before COVID, but when COVID hit, that was really tough.
Yeah, so I got a SoulCycle bag, so we'll stop picking on them because I'm taking a double after this podcast. But anyway, and I definitely don't want to get blackballed by not being able to go into a class. But having said that, I think I want to get your perspective on something because you deal with a lot of companies that are, operationally they want to make some changes, but then it's all about growth. And sometimes growth is like a Band-Aid to say yeah, I'm growing the number of locations I have, but I'm not actually kind of putting a moat around the ones that I already have. So it's almost like they're typically you'd have an advanced team that would go in and do whatever it is, or if we want to use a military I got like the SEALs that go in there. They kind of like fortify the area, and then like we bring everybody else in the back. And I feel like a lot of these management teams, whether it's because of private equity or venture capital or like, wanting to be able to say, yeah, I'm in X number of cities, or I got 2 locations in New York, and I'm like, I want to have 2 in LA. It's like, dude, you're going to like lose all your EBITDA on fucking JetBlue. Like just stay in one place. Like, you know what I mean? So, when you think about, advising people and they come to you with these grandiose ideas, what are some of the tough conversations that you have, or like, what's your approach to saying like, hey, that growth, that's a great idea, like in 2022?
I think it's difficult for a lot of founders and early founding teams right now because they want to have the technology VC run that a lot of, the Googles of the world had, right? But when you're brick and mortar, you have to think about growth differently. And so if I'm thinking about building a brick and mortar business that will really work, I'm going to need to be very mindful about making sure that if I'm going to franchise this thing, I know exactly what it takes for this thing to succeed, because I don't want in 3 years to saturate a market and then all of a sudden suck out a bunch of the early adopters because they didn't win. I see people all the time get into these franchises and there's some momentum behind it, but then the franchisor saturates a market, and then all of a sudden the franchisees are basically left out to dry, having paid a significant amount of money to start this franchise. So if I'm advising somebody, I'm saying, what exactly makes this business, and let's just call it a brick and mortar, facility, what makes this business sustainable and growable at, to your point, an EBITDA level that makes sense? And a lot of people, when I first ask them that question, have no answer. They just think, well, my brand is great, or my method is great, or my coaches are great, or my content is great. It's like, those are all good things, but that doesn't mean that you can put 1,000 stores down and have a model that actually works in different cities. I think that people just need to think about the timeline that they're using to create something really solid. Now, I kind of came out of the CrossFit world at one point. So, they put 15,000 of those bad boys down, but look what's happening in this exact moment in CrossFit, right? It's chaotic right now. And I think Eric Rose is a great person to come in and really take the reins on it. But that was just a complete libertarian, we don't give a shit what happens. We're just going to, and that was great for the people who were highly capable, but I would argue that that's not repeatable enough to have a brand that's going to work for a large percentage of the store owners.
Yeah, no, that's one of the cases we go over in the Halo Academy. And it's like, if you don't have an exclusive territory, you could wake up one day and you're basically, competing against either an ex-trainer or somebody else that's using that brand. And it's like it's like a Darwinian, Death Star that you basically just like decided to like help them, brand, part of your community, so do you help people actually identify like, hey, here's a franchise and here's like the pros and cons of it? Do they typically have already bought a territory and a location, and then, they say, hey, Jim can help me optimize what I'm doing or potentially make sure I don't lose my investment? When do you typically come into opportunities?
It depends. And I want to be careful because I'm just kind of getting into this next stage. I've done this a bunch without being a formal consultant for businesses, but I'm now just starting to kind of move into that world because I just left my last business. But typically where I'll come in is when people are just getting up and running and they realize very quickly they don't know how to operate one of these facilities, or I'll come in after momentum has slowed because they're very clear that there's a problem. So typically people aren't looking for consultants when they think everything's going well. So that's where most of my conversations organically come from. And what I'll do with them is I'll just start asking them a lot of questions to see what they understand about the game that they're playing. And I think that a lot of people get into these franchises not necessarily understanding the true game that they're playing. So if you were in, an operational efficiency model, Orange Theory, F45, etc., or SoulCycle for that matter, it's like you've got to put X number of people in that room all day, every day to make the numbers that, were promised to you essentially. Right. And so what is the size of that market? A lot of people didn't look at that initially. How are you going to attract that many people and keep them in the business? A lot of people didn't look at that initially. The technology until very recently was very weak on specific retention statistics and specific lifetime values of clients and when people might leave. I've seen some stuff that's coming out that's interesting on predicting, when people will churn out, or predicting what your average lifetime client or lifetime value will be per each type of client in different buckets. That's interesting to me, that I think all franchisors should look at. But typically people don't reach out at all until there's a problem. And that's when I'm brought in, just because I've got so many different experiences in the industry.
Yeah, I think sometimes people come out way too late and, like raise their hand and think that, you could be coming in like that, like bar rescue guy on TV and be like, yeah, let me just come in here. I'll repaint a couple things, tweak a couple things, and you're off and running. Sometimes it's usually, a lot deeper and, trying to understand the special sauce and then trying to make sure like you get back or you focus on the instructors. I mean, it's interesting. We were talking about, talent related to brands, and then some owners thinking like, okay, the brand is more important than the instructor, or the time is more important than the instructor. So do you think in COVID, post-COVID, that there's going to be somewhat of like a reawakening that, your instructor that's got a relationship with, 50 or 100 or 200 of your members, we used to say back in the day, jumping around, I used to be a counselor at camp, summer camp, and he said a happy counselor makes a happy camp. Because if the counselors are happy, the kids are going to be happy. So do you kind of see maybe like a reawakening of, not saying like, yeah, pay this guy $35 to teach a class or $40, and they basically try and maybe have a little more appreciation for like the live entertainment that's actually being put forth?
You mentioned Peloton, and I think it's an interesting example because of the building that they're building to house their content. And I think that's going to be really unique to the industry. I'm a believer that the influencers are going to yield a lot more power than, I shouldn't say yield, sorry, wield a lot more power than they used to, because they're the ones with the direct relationship to the end consumer. So I think that brands are beautiful for eyeballs right now, but the people delivering those classes and creating the experience that really emotionally resonates with the end consumer are going to matter an awful lot. And I think that you're seeing that with the high Instagram follower influencers. They're getting paid well for what they're doing. Right. But if you can't create that type of an environment, you're going to have no value. And so I think that you're going to see a lot of digital platforms built up where these influencers are going to teach classes of 4,000, 5,000 people, because they are that energetic with the exact service that they offer. And then the brand of Peloton is where all the eyeballs will come from. And I know I'm going very black and white, but if you don't have that connection to a coach, trainer, group instructor, whatever you want to call it, people don't stay. They just don't. Yeah. And so you have to have people who can deliver the exact methodology, the exact methodology that you wanted to deliver with high energy and high connection. And when you do that, that has worked very well, brick and mortar, online, whatever. And there's a lot of ways that you can have the main instructor leading the room with additional instructors that are checking form and connecting with people one-to-one during the class. I think that's really important when those classes get very big. But I actually think that you're going to see digital classrooms or group training rooms that ultimately become tribal, and they create accountability for small groups. So I've been saying this forever. I think yoga has a serious problem in person, because you could put 6 people inside of your living room on the mirror watching a yoga class, and all of a sudden it's like we feel just as good and connected to our group of close friends, and we have the best yoga instructor in the world teaching us a class. So I think that it's like it comes down to structural economics, right? It's like yoga is the cheapest thing in the world to deliver because you need a room. That's it, right? So I've seen yoga on dirty old carpets, on wood floors, it doesn't matter, outside in the grass. And so you have to ask yourself, what made people come? It's always the instructor.
Right. Exactly.
And so does it help if they can maneuver people, in poses? Sure. But I don't think that that's the most important thing.
So two things that have come out, and some of them have come out of some podcasts that we've had. Like we had a guy who was, pretty overweight and said, look, the reason why I don't come to a health club anymore, a studio, is because you guys don't make it fun. Like I play tennis because it's fun. And then, I come in and you say I'm going to lose 25 pounds in like 4 weeks. And I'm like, bro, it's not happening. So like, let me just walk out of here and kind of put my head back in my, into my chest and like go play tennis. So, do you think maybe we have to kind of rethink the messaging and maybe we got a little too complicated about what we're doing here?
Yeah. I think a lot of fitness brands attract people who already do fitness. And I think that that's wonderful, right? Because if you've got a better mousetrap, why not attract those people? But I do think that the massive success stories that all of these brands should, talk about, they're fewer numbers of people than you might think per percentage of their population in the gym. And so I'm kind of maybe a purposeful thinker, right? Like I don't want somebody to come into the gym unless they want to be there. And when I own gyms, I try to make that really clear to people. It's like, if you don't want to be here, that's fine. You know what I mean? But I only want you to show up when you think that what we do is fun.
Right.
And so lots of different people find lots of different things fun. You like Soul Cycle. Some people like running around a mountain. Some people like swimming. I think that all of that can be a beautiful way for somebody to get healthy. There just needs to be some structure around how they do it so that they build great consistency of their habits. And I think that's where people, run off the tracks, is that they do something for a couple of weeks and then they stop. And it's like, okay, well, that's clearly not going to work. If you do, like if you're the person on the podcast, if they played tennis, 4 weeks every day and they ate a sensible diet, they'd probably lose a couple pounds.
Yeah.
Do I think 25? Probably not. But, that's a lifestyle. They got to choose a lifestyle if they want to go in that direction.
So, in closing here, a couple of things. One is, have you been able to convince operators that you've worked with or some of the conversations you're having now to basically say like the bricks and mortar of your business is part of your business and it's not your business? Like, dude, I feel like a lot of these companies, a lot of these owners and a lot of these instructors are the authority in like their 3 to 5 mile radius, yet they don't really market it that way. And they think that you have to walk in order to have this relationship. I don't know, it might be an open-ended question, just a comment, but what are your thoughts on like trying to say, hey, look, everyone that wants to lose weight or everybody wants to have fun in this 5 mile radius, like is a potential client?
Yes. So okay. all of that to say, yes. I think that if you're a local gym owner, you have to focus a ton of effort on your local area. It's not worth trying to build a global brand. It won't work. But if you can build a really well-known local brand, yes, much of that will be done digitally, but going to events, meeting people at coffee shops, partnering and sponsoring things, really getting to know the people around you, that is real influence. And so I think if you can develop that, and I said this to you before we started, content is king. Like, what are you sending out to the world that they want to consume? It's like if I send out something about the anatomy, that makes me more fit than you, it's like these clients don't care about that. That's not what they care about on a daily basis. They want to look good, move well, have no pain, right, and have fun. Yeah. And so if you can send them out content and project yourself out to your community to be the pillar of that, they will naturally be attracted to you. And so I think that's really important. On the COVID side, I think you have no choice but to have a digital component of your business just in case. I think whether we're talking vaccine or whatever, we're in the COVID era for a while, and you had better protect yourself effectively. And then the kind of the last piece that I think is at least important, and I've just been on enough of these podcasts to just say it bluntly, most of these local operators don't do sales or marketing well at all, or choose not to do it at all. And that is brutal to their longevity. Now, I'm not saying that they don't also need to do the retention side. I always have said acquisition and retention are just as important, but you have to go out and grab people and bring them into you. You can't just assume they're going to show up.
Got it. So you got any, in closing here, you got any quotes that you live by or things that are Crowellisms?
I love the quote that you have to see the whole board. I love thinking strategically, but if you don't understand the system with which you play in, then you can't understand how the board should even be set up. So I love that. And then I've always loved, since I was a kid, obstacles are what you see when you take your eyes off the goal. I'm a very kind of black and white, like if I'm going to go after something, I'm going all in. And I think that that's always worked for me.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, it was great connecting with you. I think this podcast will be really valuable for people to think better about their business, think about the new board that they're playing with, and let's hit some goals and help more and more people. So look forward to meeting you in person, and maybe we'll see you in the academy as well. So
yeah, sounds great, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good to meet you, buddy. All right,
Take care.
Later, buddy.
This is Pete Moore. As you know, I am a big believer in personal development. I got a time-saving opportunity here for you, recommending Dan Millman's 4 Purposes of Life. Go to audible.com/Halo Talks. You want to register there, get a free audiobook. It's $14.95 a month thereafter, giving you things that I do to make myself better, and hopefully it makes you better. Go Halo. Let's play to win.